Hey there, everybody. Hope you're all doing well, having a good day so far. And hopefully I won't ruin it too bad with my boring lecture. I'm just kidding. That'd be boring. But anyway, in all seriousness, we spent the last couple of weeks really talking about the North, what they were going through before the Civil War, talking about the Industrial Revolution, on how the class is structured. You might have learned a little bit about even the reform movements going on in the North. Now we need to talk about the South. And after that, after this lecture, we'll be really talking about the tension between the two sides. So it's important that you understand some of the differences between the two. So, what's been going on in the South before the Civil War? We've talked a lot about slavery. We talked about that before spring break, and really, slavery is a defining, if not the defining thing of Southern society. The institution is incredibly important to the South and to understanding the South. But right now we're going to talk a little bit more, and we'll involve some slavery and some review, but we got to talk about a few other things. So the first thing to know is that before the Civil War, the South is actually changing. It's not changing like the North. It's not moving in a whole new direction of industry and free labor. It's embracing slavery even tighter, if anything. And all that has to do with something called cotton, right? And if you don't know what cotton is, I don't think that should be an issue. But look at the tag on your shirt; it might have some cotton in there. Okay, and it's important for creating textiles, so your blankets and all of your clothing at the time. And this cotton's getting shipped to the northern part of America, to the north. It's also getting shipped to Europe, where a lot of these clothes and other textiles and other goods are being produced. But cotton was such an important crop that it actually becomes known as king cotton in the South, meaning this is the moneymaker. This is the thing that we're going to try and do as best we can. Now, around the turn of the century, all the way back in 1800, and even a little before that, really, cotton was not very profitable. It was very labor intensive. Some people were growing it, but most people really didn't do a lot of that. Most people were still into tobacco. And a guy named Eli Whitney, who was actually a northerner, invented something called the cotton gin. The cotton gin made it easier to get the seeds out of your cotton. It was a very simple machine, but kind of an ingenious design, and it gets copied a lot by a lot of southern plantation owners. Before he can get a patent, he doesn't make a dime off of it, um, pretty much because it's so easy to copy this design. But that makes cotton incredibly profitable and expands slavery. Even though it reduces labor immediately to deseed the cotton, it expands slavery because the Southerners want more and more land for growing the now profitable cotton. Don't feel too bad for Eli Whitney, though. He's going to go to the North, and he's going to invent something called interchangeable parts, which kind of makes it possible to have factories and to have a lot of the things we have today, and he'll make a lot of money off that. He doesn't make the same mistake. He goes right to the patent office pretty much. So we have King Cotton going on, and this expands slavery. By the time we get to the Civil War, there's 4 million slaves in the South. That's out of like 9 million people. So slavery is a huge part. But the thing that's kind of crazy about the whole thing in the South and in Southern society, most white Southerners do not own slaves, right? So most of them are too poor to own slaves. Um, but if you are kind of this, what we call the planter class, that's people, and you'll see different numbers of slaves that qualify you for the planter class, but if you own over, let's say, 20 or 30 or 50 slaves, you're kind of in this planter class. It means you got a lot of money, you're going to have a lot of land, and you're going to have just a lot of wealth. This is the class that kind of decides the culture of the South before the Civil War. And these are the people, whenever we talk about Southern politicians want that, or Southern politicians do this, most of those guys are going to be in this planter class. So it's kind of important to actually understand what they're all about. They wanted to copy European manners. They thought of themselves kind of like medieval lords in a way. Um, they thought of themselves as being equal with the high society back in Europe. So you have a lot of land instead of peasants like you have in Europe. You have slaves in America, so that's a little bit different. And you basically then live a well-mannered life as a gentleman and as a lady. So honor is an incredibly important concept. You don't just let someone insult you and get away with it. That's not what a gentleman does. Um, so there's a lot of like duels in the South, and there's even fights. There are even fights on the floor of Congress. And I'm not trying to blame a side here, but I'll just say Southerners tend to be involved and tend to maybe start it a little bit. Um, but it's pretty important to remember that this is kind of the people in charge, even though most whites in the South are very poor and they are small family farmers. these small family farmers, the thing that kind of stinks about that, they might own their own land or they might rent it from a plantation owner. But either way, the best land in the South is all used for cash crops. It's not used to grow food. It's not used to make these small farmers able to profit. It is used to really continue the plantation system. Okay, so if you are one of these small, what we call kind of backcountry farmers, you have a very small chance of ever really growing truly wealthy because you have some of the worst land in the South, probably. Although most of the good land is going to be used for plantations. So this society, people are kind of stuck. You're generally born into the class you're going to stay in, whether you're a slave or a free person. Whether you're rich or poor, that's usually kind of where you stay. The main thing that kind of concerns a lot of these Southerners, and one of the reasons that they really do things the way that they do, one of the reasons that they will really make sure to have strict laws and things on slavery is slave rebellion. They are absolutely terrified of that. That's like their worst case scenario. And there are a few slave rebellions throughout American history. You can learn about those. You can research those. Nat Turner Rebellion would be the most famous one if you want to look up and know a little bit more about that. We're going to get into another concept here that is very important to the Civil War. That is called states' rights. The first thing that I'll say, historians still argue about this stuff now, so you can have whatever opinion you kind of want. I will generally argue, I will talk about the different factors of what maybe caused the Civil War, but it kind of comes down to slavery. If you pull a thread, it kind of traces back to slavery most of the time. A lot of historians want to argue or will argue states' rights. Plenty will also argue slavery, just so you know. But states' rights is the concept that you have our federal government, the people in Washington, D.C., but you also have things that only state governments should be doing. So with states' rights, the South really believed that states should be able to get rid of federal laws they didn't like, or should be able to even theoretically leave the Union if they wanted to. The northern states had said some things like this at different times in American history, but by the time we get to the 1840s and 50s before the Civil War, they are much more into a stronger federal government, because stronger federal governments mean better business and better trade with other countries, which means more money to a lot of those northern states. But in the South, they're very into the concept that a state government should be able to make rules and laws for its people. Doesn't sound so bad in theory, but is used in this case to keep slavery alive as long as possible. It also really makes things much more confusing when we're making all these compromises about the land out west, whether it should have slavery or not, and the federal government has to make a compromise and decide, and then you start throwing in the concept that, oh, well, you know, we could let those states out there have their own rights. Well, that they will send people to the federal government to throw off a very careful balance. So states' rights is a pretty important concept leading up to the Civil War, and we still wrestle with it somewhat today, even though the states are much less powerful than they were, but I'm getting off task, so I'll stop that. So those are kind of the big things to remember here. The South is becoming more and more, it's embracing slavery. It's embracing cash crop agriculture, not embracing industry. That's going to cause some problems when you try and wage a war on a huge industrial scale. And we'll talk about that in a few weeks. And we'll talk about all the issues between North and South much closer to now. Closer to now, that's a terrible way to say that. But anyway, see you next time.